shock in the US after a prominent right-wing activist, Charlie Kirk, was shot dead while addressing students on a campus in Utah. Video footage showed Mr. Kirk, a close ally of Donald Trump, speaking and then slumping down in his seat.
The governor of Utah described Kirk's killing as a political assassination. President Trump announced the death of Charlie Kirk on social media this afternoon, and within 1 hour, the White House lowered its flags to half staff.
Here's the post on Truth Social the president put out, writing that the great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead. No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie.
Charlie Kirk, a fiery political star, a young father, a voice that stirred crowds of thousands. But during one of his signature campus debates, a single shot rang out. In front of 3,000 people, he collapsed.
He was sitting under a tent, as we mentioned, taking questions from the crowd. We will not be showing the actual shooting, of course, but it was under that tent when he was hit in the neck. Witnesses ran from the scene in the aftermath.
Charlie Kirk has been fatally shot, and the shockwaves are ripping through the nation. What really happened at that event? And who could have wanted him silenced? Charlie Kirk built a career on confrontation. From founding Turning Point USA in his late teens to touring college campuses, hosting debates, launching media platforms, he was unafraid of strong opinions, critiques, controversy. He became, for many, the face of a rising conservative youth movement. But all fame comes at a cost. Charlie often stood firmly in the spotlight, and in doing so, drew both supporters and enemies. He was always preaching engagement, always casting himself as the underdog in battles of culture and ideology. Then, on September 10, 2025, during one of his public speaking events at Utah Valley University, part of his American Comeback tour, everything changed. A shot fired from a distant building hit Charlie in the neck. He died later at the hospital. The event sparked outrage, fear, and political division.
That breaking news: political activist and conservative media personality Charlie Kirk shot and killed while speaking at an event in Utah Valley University this afternoon.
This is the story of Charlie Kirk, not just of his rise, but of the tragedy that ended his voice and of a nation forced to face just how fragile public discourse has become. Charlie Kirk was born in 1993 in Illinois. From early on, politics fascinated him. He studied leadership, ideology, and public speaking. When he was 18, he founded Turning Point USA, an organization focused on conservative activism on high school and college campuses. He dropped out of college to pursue the movement full-time. Over the years, Kirk became known for his bold rhetoric, his ability to draw large crowds, and his unapologetic stance on topics like free speech, culture war issues, and conservative values. He built a media presence, podcasts, radio, social media, and became a lightning rod. Supporters called him courageous. Critics called him combative. Kirk married Erica Francois, with whom he had 2 children. As his profile grew, his family life remained a central and sometimes controversial part of his public image. He often spoke about themes of faith, family, and personal sacrifice. By 2024, Turning Point USA was a major force in youth politics.
The founder of the conservative organization Turning Point USA, an author and media personality, he built a massive following, particularly popular with young audiences.
College debate events like Prove Me Wrong became signature events. He toured, debated, attracted fire from both sides of the political spectrum. And through it all, Kirk embraced his polarizing status, believing that influence often comes with opposition. But opposition sometimes becomes more than critique. Sometimes it turns dangerous. Was Charlie so determined to be heard that he underestimated the risks that come with speaking so loudly? In September 2025, Charlie Kirk launched what he billed as the American Comeback Tour, a series of events across universities meant to re-energize his movement, debate opponents, and challenge critics. The first stop, Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. On the day of the event, about 3,000 people gathered. Charlie took the stage under a tent. Among the event's features was a Prove Me Wrong table, a format he used to debate from the crowd directly, often drawing attendees who disagreed with him. Despite protest petitions earlier in some campuses, UVU had allowed him to speak, citing principles of free speech. Roughly 20 minutes after the event began, while taking audience questions, a shot rang out.
We're going to be here for a couple hours. Get comfortable. Bring the best libs that Utah has to offer.
Witnesses describe hearing a sharp crack, then seeing Charlie recoil, clutch at his neck, blood visible. The shot, authorities say, came from a building approximately 200 yards, about 180 to 200 meters away, likely the Losee Center. Chaos erupted. The crowd scattered. People screamed and ducked. Security rushed to Kirk, took him from the stage. He was transported to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead later that afternoon at age 31.
Conservative political activist Charlie Kirk is dead after being shot at a rally at a university in Utah.
Police and federal agents immediately launched an investigation. 2 people were briefly detained, then released. No suspect has been publicly named. CCTV and social media videos are being collected. Officials described it as an apparent targeted attack. Governors, presidents, politicians across the aisle condemned the killing. Kirk's death was called a political assassination. But many questions remain unanswered. Who fired the shot? What was the motive? Was this premeditated? And as America digests this horror, how safe are public figures in polarized times? The news of Charlie Kirk's death spread within minutes across social media, news outlets, and television networks. Clips of the moment, recorded on shaky cell phones from audience members, circulated online almost instantly. The images were graphic, but more than that, they were haunting. A man who built his life on words, debate, and confrontation had been silenced by a single bullet. Politicians from across the spectrum reacted quickly. Supporters hailed him as a martyr for free speech, a man who gave his life to defend his principles on hostile campuses. His critics, though still opposed to his politics, expressed outrage at the act of violence, calling it a dangerous escalation in America's already fragile public discourse. Flags were lowered, tributes poured in, and candlelight vigils were held outside Turning Point USA headquarters. Former students who had attended his events shared stories of encounters with him, whether inspiring or infuriating. His podcasts shot to the top of streaming charts as thousands revisited his final words. But while the tributes grew louder, so too did the fear. Many asked, if Charlie Kirk could be shot while speaking at a college event, who's next? For years, public figures across the political spectrum had faced protests, harassment, and threats. Now, the violence had escalated to assassination. The FBI stepped in, coordinating with Utah authorities. Investigators combed through CCTV footage, interviewed attendees, and searched nearby buildings. Ballistic experts traced the bullet's trajectory to a high window in the Losee Center. But even with this evidence, no arrest was immediately made. Speculation grew. Was it politically motivated? Was it personal? Was it the work of a lone shooter or a broader plot? Charlie Kirk had always thrived on confrontation, but in death, his tragedy revealed something larger: the fragility of democracy when debate turns into violence. And that raised a terrifying question. If silencing voices becomes the new battleground, how far can this go before the system collapses? Amid the chaos of investigations and national outrage, one truth cut the deepest. Charlie Kirk was not just a public figure, he was a husband and a father. Charlie married Erica Francois, a former beauty queen and entrepreneur, in 2021. The couple welcomed children together, often sharing their experiences of parenthood and faith on social media. To his supporters, his young family symbolized the values he preached: traditionalism, commitment, and building a future rooted in faith. Now, that family faced the unthinkable. Erica released a short, heart-wrenching statement days after the shooting. Her voice cracked as she described her husband as a man who loved his family even more than his country. She emphasized that his children would grow up knowing their father not only as a national figure, but as someone who made them laugh, told them bedtime stories, and believed in their future. Friends close to the family painted a picture of a man who, despite his polarizing image, was fiercely private in his personal life. He rarely let the public into his home life, believing it was sacred. But in death, the balance between public and private collapsed. His widow and children became the faces of a tragedy too big to contain. Supporters launched fundraisers for his family, raising millions within days. Vigils spread beyond Utah, reaching college campuses across the country. Murals of his image appeared in cities. Yet for all the public support, Erica and the children faced something far heavier: life without him. For a man who spoke endlessly about defending the family unit, the cruelest twist of fate was that his own family would now have to defend his memory. So the question remains: how does a family grieve when their pain is not private but public, broadcast across the nation as part of a political storm? In the days following the shooting, the investigation into Charlie Kirk's death became the focus of the entire nation. Federal, state, and local authorities worked together, combing through every detail of that September afternoon. Forensic teams examined the scene meticulously. The bullet that struck Charlie was recovered during surgery at the hospital, giving investigators a critical piece of evidence. Experts traced its trajectory, confirming that it had been fired from a high window in the Losay Center, just across from the tent where thousands had gathered to hear him speak. Authorities sealed off the building, searching every room. They found shell casings near one window, abandoned in haste, but no gun. Investigators began combing through security footage from the university, nearby businesses, and even dashcams from parked cars. Each second of video was scrutinized, every shadow analyzed. 2 individuals were briefly detained after being spotted fleeing the area, but both were later released. Neither had weapons, and both insisted they were simply terrified students running from the chaos. With no arrests made, frustration grew. The public wanted answers, and fast. Conspiracy theories flourished online. Some claimed it was a politically motivated assassination. Others speculated about foreign involvement, citing Charlie's growing prominence in international conservative movements. Still others insisted it was the work of a lone wolf, driven by ideological hatred or personal vendetta. The lack of clarity only intensified the political storm. Supporters demanded justice, framing Charlie as a martyr for free speech and conservative values. Critics, while condemning the violence, warned against turning his death into a weapon for further division. The FBI urged patience, but patience was in short supply. Behind closed doors, investigators struggled with the chilling reality. The assassin had managed to strike in broad daylight in front of thousands and escape without leaving a clear trail. That fact alone left many wondering, was this a meticulously planned operation or a crime of opportunity pulled off by someone who simply vanished into the chaos? And with each day that passed without answers, another question loomed. Would the truth about who killed Charlie Kirk ever be fully revealed? Even in life, Charlie Kirk was no stranger to controversy. He built his career on confrontation, challenging liberal ideologies on campuses, sparking debates on social media, and positioning himself as the voice of young conservatism. His critics accused him of spreading misinformation, stoking division, and oversimplifying complex issues. His supporters saw him as a fearless truth-teller who spoke what others were too afraid to say. After his death, these controversies only grew louder. On one hand, tributes poured in from allies who hailed him as a warrior for free speech, a man willing to put himself on the front lines of ideological battles. They described his assassination as the ultimate proof of the dangers he had warned about, a culture where dissent was no longer tolerated. On the other hand, detractors pointed out the polarizing nature of his rhetoric. They argued that his style of debate, often combative and unyielding, had contributed to the hostile environment he thrived in. They cautioned against painting him as a saint, reminding the public of the sharp divisions he often inflamed. Media outlets ran endless coverage, some highlighting his achievements, others dissecting his flaws. Old clips of fiery debates resurfaced, fueling arguments across the internet. What became clear was that Charlie Kirk's legacy would forever be defined by both admiration and outrage. His organization, Turning Point USA, faced an uncertain future. Would it survive without its charismatic leader, or would it crumble under the weight of his absence? His staff pledged to carry on his mission, but without Kirk's commanding presence, the movement's identity seemed shaken. For Carson, his tragedy was not just about losing a voice, but about what it represented. The silencing of someone so polarizing revealed the dangers of an age where political disagreement often tips into violence. And perhaps the most haunting question of all remains: was Charlie Kirk's legacy cemented in the ideals he preached, or in the tragedy of the bullet that ended his voice forever? Charlie Kirk's assassination did not occur in a vacuum. For years, political tension in the United States had been building to dangerous levels. Heated debates on cable news, endless battles on social media, and growing hostility at rallies and protests created a climate where words often escalated into threats, and sometimes into physical violence. Kirk himself had warned about this. In speeches, he often said that America was heading toward a point where people no longer debated ideas but attacked each other personally. Ironically, his very style of politics, confrontational, unfiltered, relentless, may have both reflected and fueled that same reality.
A social media savvy personality and organizer, Kirk helped modernize the Republican Party's appeal. His success made him a critical part of the Trump inner circle with frequent visits to the White House.
After his death, analysts began asking whether America had crossed a line. If a high-profile figure could be shot in broad daylight on a university campus, what did that mean for free speech? Could any public figure, conservative or liberal, truly feel safe anymore? The tragedy also reignited old debates about gun violence and security. Why wasn't Charlie better protected, especially given the size of the crowd and the controversies that surrounded him? Should political speakers, no matter their stance, be guarded like heads of state? Or would that destroy the very openness of public discourse that democracy requires? Historians pointed to parallels: the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and others who fell victim to political violence in eras of unrest. Each death marked a turning point, a reminder that ideas alone can inspire both greatness and hatred. Charlie Kirk's murder forced Americans to confront an uncomfortable truth. Violence had once again entered the political arena. And if the nation could not find a way to lower the temperature, many feared he would not be the last. So the chilling question lingers: was Kirk's death an isolated tragedy, or a warning sign of darker days to come? While the nation debated politics, security, and legacy, Charlie Kirk's family was left to face the most personal tragedy of all. His wife, Erica, was thrust into the spotlight in ways she never could have imagined. For years, she had been known as a supportive partner, appearing occasionally at events and sharing glimpses of their family life online. Now, she became the grieving widow of a man whose death was broadcast across the nation. The couple's young children were suddenly without their father, too young to fully grasp the magnitude of what had happened. They were left in the care of family members while Erica handled the flood of media attention, condolences, and responsibilities. Supporters sent gifts, letters, and donations, but no amount of support could fill the void left behind. At memorial services, Erica delivered a eulogy that left many in tears. She described her husband not as the firebrand political figure the world knew, but as a man who sang silly songs to his kids, prayed with his family before bed, and called home from the road no matter how late it was. To the world, he was a voice, she said, but to us, he was everything. Yet even in her grief, Erica faced criticism. Online trolls targeted her social media, some mocking her pain, others spreading conspiracy theories about the shooting. The cruelty of the internet, a force that had once amplified Charlie's voice, now turned into a weapon that deepened his family's suffering. For Carson, and for anyone watching, the tragedy of Charlie Kirk wasn't just about politics or ideology, it was about the unbearable human cost of a culture that turned discourse into destruction. His wife and children bore that cost in silence, their grief unfolding not in private, but on the national stage. And this raises a haunting question. When tragedy becomes entertainment for some and political fuel for others, is true healing ever possible? Turning Point USA was Charlie Kirk's creation, his life's work, and his megaphone to the nation. What began as a scrappy student organization grew into a powerhouse of youth activism, boasting thousands of chapters, millions of dollars in funding, and a direct line to the heart of America's conservative movement. For years, it was impossible to separate Charlie from the organization. His voice, his presence, his style, they were its DNA. But after his assassination, Turning Point faced its greatest challenge. Without its founder, could it survive? Almost immediately, leadership announced their intention to carry forward Kirk's vision. They organized candlelight vigils, tributes, and emergency meetings to assure supporters that the mission would continue. Staff members spoke about Charlie's relentless energy, his ability to connect with students, and his passion for shaping the next generation. Yet doubts lingered. Kirk's personal charisma was a driving force behind Turning Point's growth. He had an instinct for debate, a knack for viral moments, and a willingness to wade into controversy. Could anyone replicate that? Or would the movement fade without the man who had built it from nothing? Donors, too, began asking questions. Some pledged even more money in Kirk's honor, hoping to preserve his legacy. Others worried about the organization's future direction, unsure if it could thrive without his leadership. Rival groups circled, ready to attract students who might feel Turning Point was no longer the same without Charlie. What became clear in the weeks following his death was that Turning Point USA was at a crossroads. It could either rise from tragedy, fueled by a sense of martyrdom, or it could unravel, proving that the heart of the movement had always been one man alone. And so the question stands, was Turning Point truly a lasting institution, or was it always destined to die with its founder? Even as tributes continued and Turning Point grappled with its future, the investigation into Charlie Kirk's death remained unresolved. Each press conference from law enforcement left the public with more questions than answers. Who was the shooter? Why did they target Kirk? How could they escape from a crowded campus without leaving a clear trail? Theories multiplied. Some insisted it was an act of political terrorism, designed to silence a voice of the conservative movement. Others whispered about possible internal enemies, rivals within the political sphere who saw Kirk as a threat. Still others suspected a lone extremist, emboldened by years of online vitriol and convinced that violence was the only solution. But with no arrests, speculation spiraled out of control. News networks ran endless panels dissecting every possible angle. Social media buzzed with wild claims. Families of students who had attended the event demanded reassurance that campuses were safe. University officials were criticized for not having tighter security, while law enforcement faced backlash for the lack of progress. For Charlie's family, the lack of answers was unbearable. Every day without closure was another day of reliving the horror. His widow pressed for transparency, calling on investigators to keep the public informed, to ensure that her husband's death would not be swept aside by bureaucracy. And yet, as weeks turned into months, the silence grew louder. No suspect, no motive, just an open wound in America's already fragile democracy. The most haunting part of the tragedy may be this: sometimes, even in the age of surveillance, cameras, and constant information, the truth can remain just out of reach. And when it does, the unanswered questions can become as painful as the tragedy itself. So we must ask, will justice ever come for Charlie Kirk? Or will his assassination remain one of America's most chilling unsolved mysteries? Charlie Kirk lived his life in the spotlight, unapologetic, controversial, and determined to be heard. He was adored by some, despised by others, but never ignored. And in the end, his assassination silenced not only a man, but also a movement's loudest voice. His tragedy is more than the story of one life cut short. It is a mirror held up to America itself. It reveals a nation where debates too often become battles, where ideas are drowned out by anger, and where violence threatens the very foundation of free speech. Charlie's family will carry the heaviest burden. His wife and children will live with the absence of a husband and a father, their grief playing out under the glare of cameras and headlines. His organization, Turning Point USA, will decide whether to wither or to grow stronger without him. And the nation will be left to wrestle with the questions his death forces us to ask. How safe are our voices? How fragile is our democracy? And how far are we willing to go before we remember that disagreement must never end in destruction? Charlie Kirk's story is heartbreaking. It is polarizing. It is a warning. But above all, it is a reminder that every voice, no matter how controversial, deserves to be heard without fear of a bullet. Now we turn to you. What do you think his death says about the future of America? Is this the tragic price of free speech in a divided nation? Or can his legacy inspire us to build something better? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe these stories matter, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes the untold truths are the ones that shape us the most.